His Excellency Consul General of Japan to Kolkata, Yutaka Nakamura, Her Excellency Consul General of Australia to Kolkata, Ron Ainsworth, Honorable Vishvas V. Sapkal, Joint Secretary, Indo-Pacific and South, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, Professor Horimoto Takenori, my colleague in ORF, Dr. Anasua Chaudhury, ladies and gentlemen, dignitaries, my ORF colleagues, it gives me immense pleasure in welcoming you yet again in the ORF Kolkata Consulate General of Japan in Kolkata's collaborative event. We have been collaborating for such an annual event over the last 4 years now, and with special interests in India's Northeast so far. So this time it has been a departure from the trend that we have followed over the last 3 occasions. We decided to look and deliberate on a broader geography that concerns us immediately as also remotely over the short and the long runs and over time and space. It is the Indo-Pacific. The space has always been complex and has presented itself with complex problems. Complex problems, as such, do not have solutions. They need to be resolved. And the complexity of the Indo-Pacific can be made out from the theme itself. Now, India has launched the IPOI, or the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, to focus on 7 pillars conceived around maritime security, maritime ecology, maritime resources, capacity building and resource sharing, DRR or disaster risk reduction and management, science, technology and academic cooperation, and trade and connectivity and maritime transport. Given the wide experience of Japan in the field of connectivity, their lead on this pillar of IPOI is definitely going to be a major contribution for the connectivity initiatives in the Indo-Pacific. As far as Southeast Asia or the ASEAN is concerned, it occupies a central position in the FOIP, or the Free and Open Indo-Pacific Strategy, as the region possesses internationally vital sea lanes of communications. It is therefore important to understand the Southeast Asia's perception as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned. So the questions which are obvious in this context are, is absence of any of the Southeast Asian nations in the construction of the FOIP causing a serious concern? Does SEA or Southeast Asia tend to associate the FOIP with the Quad or the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue comprised of Japan, United States, Australia, and India? What is its stance on the recently formulated AUKUS or the AUKUS, through which the UK is going to emerge as one of the major stakeholders in this entire space? So while geostrategic concerns loom large, they keep on affecting geoeconomics. Indo-Pacific presents itself, on the other hand, with a massive market from both perspectives, the product market and the factor market. Comprising of 38 nations with 65% of the world's population, 62% of the world's GDP, and 46% of the world's merchandise trade, the issues of connectivity and regional development loom large. Now, how do we understand the scope of such a market? How do we optimally use such a market? How do we exploit the GVCs or the global value chain that is being presented by this particular space? How do we understand and exploit the forward and the backward linkages that exist in the context of the Indo-Pacific? What types of trade and connectivity arrangements should emerge? Again, geostrategic and geopolitical concerns. Can they be allowed to be weighed on the geoeconomic and the developmental concerns? This remains a normative question. Further, there are national economic goals that may come in the ways of achieving the broader regional goals. Protecting domestic industry, generating local employment, alleviating poverty are some of the crucial goals of the global south in the region, while the richer nations in the region have different goals altogether, which are divergent from these national level goals of the global south. This divergence has often come in the ways of creating regional trade agreements or free trade areas, as their impacts are different across nations, and even they vary across value chains or commodity value chains within a particular nation. However, for this market to be optimally utilized, there is a need for greater connectivity and freedom of navigation, including the mitigation of threats such as maritime piracy, undocumented migration, and terrorism. For achieving that goal, the major stakeholders have rolled out several initiatives to cultivate a greater presence in the Bay of Bengal and thereby in the wider Indo-Pacific. These endeavors emphasize on dialogue and diplomacy with Southeast Asia to strengthen logistic linkages, maritime domain awareness, and facilitate naval exercises to attain collaborative development. Again, the complexity of the Indo-Pacific attains a different level with the ways environmental challenges are unfolding. Global warming and sea level rise, marine plastics, marine pollution, losses in species diversity, coastal ecosystem losses and their impacts on livelihoods, land losses, etc. pose critical threats to life and livelihoods. Though treated as non-traditional security, from an environmental security perspective, this can also be treated as a developmental challenge. Now, climate change by itself is not merely an environmental problem. It is a developmental problem that emerges from unbridled human development ambitions, and in the process comes in the way of human life and livelihoods. Therefore, on one hand, we are dealing with complex traditional and non-traditional security problems that emerge through a melting pot of geopolitics, economics, environmental linkages. The same complex problem can also be construed as a complex developmental problem. It depends on the lens through which we look at this complexity. Yet, there is no doubt that irrespective of the lens of viewing the interactive dynamics of this complexity, the problem at the interface of politics, economics, and environment in the Indo-Pacific requires a transdisciplinary approach and a transdisciplinary perspective. This is exactly what we intend to do at ORF Kolkata, and this is exactly how we intend to look at the Indo-Pacific complex in the context of this conference titled Strategic High Tide in the Indo-Pacific, Economics, Ecology, and Security. Let me take this opportunity to thank the Consulate General of Japan in Kolkata for yet again giving us the opportunity to collaborate as the knowledge partner. I wholeheartedly thank His Excellency C.G. Nakamura yet again. I look forward to 2 days of intense learning from the deliberations of the conference. I wholeheartedly thank Her Excellency Consul General of Australia for being a part of it. I wholeheartedly thank the Joint Secretary, Mr. Sapkal, for giving his time, as also Professor Horimoto. I remain indebted to my colleagues at ORF, Dr. Anasua, and as also colleagues from Kolkata and Delhi, for the extreme hard work that has been exerted to make this event see the light of the day. I look forward to 2 days of intense learning from the deliberations of this conference. Let me also thank all the speakers and delegates of this conference and welcome you yet again. So thanks to all of you. Let me now invite my colleague, Dr. Anasua Chaudhury, Senior Fellow, Observer Research Foundation, Kolkata, to introduce the theme of the conference.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Good morning and good afternoon, all our distinguished guests and participants of this 2-day-long conference on strategic high tide in the Indo-Pacific, economics, ecology, and security. Taking cue from my colleague, Dr. Ghosh, definitely it's my pleasure to introduce the topic of the conference today. We all know how the term Indo-Pacific has been gaining currency as a new construct in the recent times, with various countries using it in their official statements. In fact, the term Indo-Pacific refers to the wide geographical expanse combining the Indian and Pacific Oceans. First proposed as a regional initiative in 2007, engaging Japan, India, Australia, and the USA. The idea gained popularity after Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, launched the Free and Open Indo-Pacific FOIP initiative in 2016 to develop the Indo-Pacific as a region of shared cooperative endeavor. Over the years, the Indo-Pacific has become a part of USA national strategy as well as received strong support from Australia. Major stakeholders operating in these geographic region, such as the USA, Japan, Australia, who are interested in maintaining stability and rule-based order in the region, have also begun to perceive that India as an emerging power in this region and have encouraged India's prominent role given its geographical centrality in the Indian Ocean region. Despite having been in use in Indian policy circles for years, the nomenclature gained a clear momentum or meaning and vision from our Prime Minister Narendra Modi's keynote speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue in June 2018. Well, India has outlined her own vision of the Indo-Pacific as natural extension of its immediate geographical region that hosts a vast array of global opportunities and challenges. The Bay of Bengal and its auxiliary, the Andaman Sea, is India's geographic gateway into the wider waters of the Indo-Pacific. To India, the Indo-Pacific is neither a club of limited members nor a grouping that seeks to dominate the region. In fact, India, as I think Dr. Ghosh has also specified in his opening remarks, that India has launched the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiatives, that's IPOI, to focus on 7 central pillars conceived around different domains cutting across maritime security, maritime ecology, maritime resource and capacity building, resource sharing, disaster risk reduction and management, science, technology, and academic cooperation, and so on. Given the wide experience of Japan in the field of connectivity, their lead to this pillar of Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative will prove to be a great fillip for the connectivity initiatives in the Indo-Pacific region. As a natural corollary, Southeast Asia occupies a central position in the FOIP strategy as the region possesses internationally vital sea lanes of communications. Therefore, it is very, very important to understand Southeast Asian nations' perception on these geographical regions and also how they perceive the rules of the other stakeholders within these geographical domain. Of course, in these area, I think the recently developed initiatives, which can be regarded as AUKUS, it also important to understand, and where UK emerges as another major stakeholder in this geographical region, and how ASEAN also interprets the inclusion of US or the role of US within this domain. While dealing with these geographical space, it is also important, I think Nilanjan has also talked about, to note that Indo-Pacific is also a major market comprising 38 countries with 65% of world's population, 62% of world's GDP, and 46% of world's merchandise trade. However, it's very important to understand how to utilize the market fully, as we are expecting it is to be developed. And in these particular domain, two critical questions still actually vitiate the global discourse. One is what are the political economic forces, drivers that determining the future of trade in this region? And another one, which is also very important, is what will be the role of regional comprehensive economic partnership in this process? I think these two questions are very, very important questions to be addressed in our interactions, in our deliberations. To enhance cooperative mechanisms, it is also important to take into account the notion of mitigation of non-traditional security threats, such as maritime piracy, undocumented migration, terrorism, and natural disasters. With rising global average temperature, some of the challenges are posing existential threat to low-lying islands within this region. But besides, I think there are other critical issues which are definitely very much, very much in need to be addressed. Sorry. And what are the policies and possibilities to take care of these crucial issues? I think these are also very important aspects to look at. All of us have already witnessed how the unprecedented pandemic COVID-19 has impacted the global economy, affecting manufacturing, supply chains, and the movement of people and goods. Presently, the region has seen the reincarnation of Quad as a new formation of Quad Plus, with the participation of several other like New Zealand, South Korea, and Vietnam. Another formation is Blue Dot Network, US-led multi-stakeholders initiative involving Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Australia, and the UK. And it's to be mentioned here that India has also expressed its interest in BDN, this new domain. So keep all these facets in consideration. The Observer Research Foundation, Kolkata chapter, in collaboration with the government of Japan, is organizing this 2-day-long conference. And this conference will be divided into 3 major segments, or 3 major business sessions on geopolitics and security, commerce and connectivity, and ecological concerns and engagements. With these few words, I'll stop here and wish to have a very thoughtful and interactive, engaging sessions. We have a plan to come up with a series of publications as an offshoot of this program or conference. So looking forward to your engagement, active engagement, to make it a success. Thank you so much.
May I now request His Excellency Nakamura Yutaka to deliver the special address.
Dr. Ghosh, Director of ORF in Kolkata, Mr. Vishvas Sapkal, Joint Secretary, Minister of External Affairs Government of India, Ms. Rowan Ainsworth, Consul General of Australia in Kolkata, Ms. Anasua Bas Roy Chaudhury, Senior Fellow ORF, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and good afternoon. It's a great pleasure for me to deliver an address at today's conference organized by Observer Research Foundation in Kolkata. I'd like to express my sincere appreciation for the kind invitation to this occasion to share Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific vision at a time when this region is undergoing unprecedented development. In the 21st century, no region will be more significant to the world peace and prosperity than Indo-Pacific. This vast geographical area, combining the Pacific and the Indian Oceans, today present an integrated geo-economic and geostrategic theater that has more geopolitical hotspot, emerging powers, economic interdependence, risk of conflict, overlapping economic, political, strategic partnership than any other region of the world. The idea of an integrated theater combining the Pacific and Indian Oceans gained popularity since 2007, when the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe first floated the idea of the Indo-Pacific as the confluence of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. During his 2007 address to the Indian Parliament, Japan's vision for free and open Indo-Pacific, officially launched in 2016, is based on the idea that the key for the stability and prosperity of the international community is dynamism that is created by combining the two continents, Asia, that is rapidly growing, and Africa, that possesses huge potential for growth, and two oceans, free and open, Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean. Today, this region faces enormous challenges to the peace, stability, security, and ecology, such as piracy, terrorism, proliferation of WMD, climate change, natural disasters, and attempt to change the status quo. Under such circumstances, Japan aims to promote peace, stability, and prosperity across the region to mark the Indo-Pacific free and open through ensuring rule-based international order, including the rule of law, freedom of navigation and overflight, peaceful settlement of disputes, and promotion of free trade. Japan cooperates with a broad range of partners which shares the vision of FOIP. No country is excluded from partnership. Our government has stated clearly that it will cooperate with any country that meets the basic principles of FOIP. Prime Minister Kishida and former Foreign Minister Motegi proactively promote the importance of maritime order in the Indo-Pacific region and the existing framework of cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. The concept of FOIP does not intend to create new institutions, nor compete with existing institutions, but it's based on the objective to sustain, promote, and bolster the existing frameworks of cooperation in a comprehensive, inclusive, and transparent manner, attaching the importance to ASEAN's centrality and unity in order to bring stability and prosperity for every country, as well as secure peace and prosperity in the region as a whole. Japan's initiative to support Asian connectivity consists of land corridor and sea corridors. And Japan has supported the master plan on ASEAN connectivity through cooperation with ASEAN Connectivity Coordinate Committee. As for sea corridors, Japan has supported the development of a maritime economic corridor connecting Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Brunei, and Philippines, mainly through port development. Apart from ASEAN, Japan has been promoting the working together with other existing frameworks of cooperation, including Quadrilateral Initiative between Japan, US, Australia, and India, Japan, America, India Trilateral Cooperation, which the Indian Prime Minister Modi referred as the Jai, meaning victory in Hindi, to name a few. The FOIP initiative values India as a critical partner in furthering the goal of promoting rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific. We find the growing convergence between our free and open Indo-Pacific vision and India's Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, IPOI, based on our shared value of upholding rule of law, importance of international law, in particular, the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, freedom of navigation and overflight, peaceful resolution of dispute, and unimpeded lawful commerce and international waters. Japan highly appreciates India's Indo-Pacific initiative, and we look forward to cooperating towards materializing the initiative. Japan intends to expand its cooperation to countries in the Pacific region, including India, in enhancing regional connectivity and capacity building assistance and other human resource development, and in such fields as humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, anti-piracy, counter-terrorism, and non-proliferation. Japan has been expanding its engagement with India and other regional partners in enhancing peace, stability, prosperity, maritime security, and connectivity in the Indo-Pacific region through a wide range of bilateral, trilateral, multilateral frameworks of cooperation. Some of these include JIMEX exercise and Malaba exercise between Japan, India, and the US, and quadrilateral dialogue between Japan, India, US, and Australia. Recap: regional cooperation agreement on combating piracy and arms robbery against ships in Asia, and in Indian Ocean Rim Association. Japan is focusing on enhancing both land and maritime connectivity over Pacific and Indian Ocean through quality infrastructure investment, which include elements of Japan's priority, such as openness, transparency, and economic efficiency, and debt sustainability. On the implementation side, Japan has been taking robust measures in order to address global infrastructure financing gap. In 2016, Japan announced its initiative entitled Expanded Partnership for Quality Infrastructure to provide approximately $200 billion in public and private capital for 5 years from 2017 to 2021 for infrastructure projects across the world, including in the Pacific region. In our endeavor to achieve a free and open Indo-Pacific that is open to all, Japan would like to expand such multilateral cooperation for peace and prosperity in the region. Japan looks forward to working together with ASEAN and its Indo-Pacific partners in this joint endeavor. Last but not least, I'd like to touch upon economics and ecology, which are the topics this seminar. Japan and India are cooperating in the various fields of economic, including in digital, green technology, healthcare, and enhancing connectivity. The construction of the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail is a Japan-India flagship project. As former Prime Minister Suga mentioned during the summit meeting with Prime Minister Modi in September, there are potential areas of cooperation, such as establishing safe and reliable 5G network and submarine cables, strengthening industrial competitiveness and supply chain, realizing realistic energy transitions, accepting workers from India under the system of special skilled worker, enhancing exchanges of IT professionals, and promoting development of India's northeastern region. As year 2022 is the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Japan and India, I hope that the bilateral cooperation will be further enhanced on this occasion. In closing, let me once again express my sincere appreciation to the ORF for its effort in organizing the event. I look forward to a most productive discussion during the course of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seiji Nakamura. Now we move from offline to online, and it gives me immense pleasure to invite Honorable Joint Secretary, Indo-Pacific and South, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, Shri Vishvas Sapkal, to deliver the inaugural address. Over to you, sir.
Good morning. Dr. Nilanjan Ghosh, Director ORF Kolkata. Mr. Nakamura Yutaka, Consul General of Japan in Kolkata. Consul General of Australia, Ms. Rowan Ainsworth, all the distinguished panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to first congratulate ORF and the government of Japan for holding this international conference. I'm delighted to participate in the virtual international conference on strategic high tide in the Indo-Pacific, economics, ecology, and security. I'll be speaking about the Indo-Pacific, a concept that has recently gained greater salience in diplomatic parlance. Literally, Indo-Pacific signifies the confluence of the Indian and the Pacific Oceans that can no longer be handled as a distinct space. We are speaking of a maritime space that connects Africa, ASEAN, Eurasia's Pacific coast, Oceania, and the Pacific coast of the Americas. Indeed, the Indo-Pacific region is an important geographical space that is home to more than 64% of the global population and contributes over 60% of our global GDP. About half of the global trade happens through the maritime trade routes in this region. Over the years, this region has seen strong and sustained economic growth spreading across the Pacific Rim, Southeast Asia, South Asia, the Gulf region, and the east and southern coast of Africa. Given that this region is primarily a maritime space, countries are naturally focused on building practical cooperation in that domain. A safe, secure, and stable maritime space is a necessary condition for peace, prosperity, and security in the region. Conversely, threats there in the region imperil human security in all its dimensions, whether by disrupting commerce, disturbing the ecology, or creating disputes over ownership and rights. In our interdependent world, the complexity of such challenges has become too large for any one nation to address by itself. Indeed, the very vastness of the arena brings out why the need for collaborative action has now become so pressing. Naturally, the individual interests of countries are at stake, but so too is their collaborative or collective benefit in ensuring that the global commons is better secured. It is the challenge of harmonizing these pulls and pressures that the Indo-Pacific policy of all players need to address. Our Indo-Pacific vision builds on India's Act East policy and the doctrine of security and growth for all in the region, that is SAGAR, announced by our Prime Minister in 2014 and 2015 respectively. Indo-Pacific vision was articulated by a Prime Minister in his keynote address at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore in June 2018. India's Indo-Pacific vision envisages a free, open, inclusive, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region built on rule-based international order, sustainable and transparent infrastructure investment, freedom of navigation and overflight, unimpeded lawful commerce, mutual respect for sovereignty, peaceful resolution of disputes, as well as equality for all nations. To give concrete shape to India's vision of the Indo-Pacific, Prime Minister announced the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, IPOI, at the 14th East Asia Summit held in Bangkok, Thailand on 4th November 2019. That is with the focus of collaborative effort to better manage, conserve, sustain, and secure the maritime domain. India's IPOI does not envisage to create a new institutional framework and will rely on the leaders-led EAS framework. It is envisaged to be structure light and cooperation heavy. Without being caught up with the institutional differences, we are willing to work with everyone in the region, including IORA, BIMSTEC, IOC, etc. Our Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, IPOI, envisages for cooperation and collaboration under 7 pillars, namely maritime security, maritime ecology, maritime resources, capacity building and resource sharing, disaster risk reduction and management, science and technology and academic cooperation, and trade and connectivity and maritime transport. While India will be the driving force behind all areas identified under the 7 pillars under IPOI, we are also exploring partnership with like-minded countries. Since the announcement of IPOI, it has been welcomed by the countries in the region. Australia has agreed to lead on the maritime ecology pillar, Japan on connectivity, France and Indonesia on the maritime resources pillar of IPOI. India would be taking the lead in disaster risk reduction and maritime security pillar of the IPOI. Under the lead of Japan for connectivity pillar of IPOI, India and Japan have jointly organized 3 seminars in March 2021 on enhancing meaningful connectivity in the region under IPOI. In April 2021, Australia announced grant of Australian $1.4 million to generate ideas with all international partners under its lead on the maritime ecology pillar of the IPOI. Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Australia announced the recipients of this grant during Indo-Pacific Business Summit held on 6 to 8 July 2021, which was organized jointly by CII and Ministry of External Affairs, and saw the participation of foreign and trade ministers from countries across the Indo-Pacific. In the past few years, several countries have announced their own concepts of the Indo-Pacific. Japan announced a vision for free and open Indo-Pacific FOIP in 2016. US announced in 2017, outlining a global goal of promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific. Australia elaborated its concept in the Defense White Paper in 2016, followed by the Foreign Policy White Paper in 2017. ASEAN also came up with its ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, that is AOIP, in June 2019. Recently, France, Germany, Netherlands, and EU have also released their own Indo-Pacific guidelines and strategies. Friends, We are committed to build upon the convergence of these initiatives and work together for peace and prosperity in the region. Overall, the cumulative impact of the activities under these pillars bring out how much we count in the world today. The Indo-Pacific speaks as much for the changes in the world as in our own aspirations. It reflects the new India, and I thank you for the opportunity given to me to share my thoughts here. As we all know that we recently passed through the difficult phase of a second wave of COVID pandemic. There are lessons and best practices that have emerged in tackling this challenge that all of us can learn from. I hope that we would come out from this difficult time to the new normal soon. I hope that the discussions in the event would come up with some useful suggestions and feedback for policymakers of the region. With these words, I wish the event a grand success. I am confident that the next 2 days will be full constructive discussions. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Many thanks, Mr. Sapkal. It gives me now immense pleasure to invite CG Rowan Ainsworth, Consul General of Australia in Kolkata, to deliver the special address. May I?
Thank you for that kind welcome and introduction. And I'd like to acknowledge my fellow speakers, Joint Secretary Sapkal and Professor Horimoto, and particularly my colleague, Japanese Consul General in Kolkata, Nakamura, and of course, Nilanjan and Anasua of the ORF for making this event possible today. And greetings to all those online and in attendance. I'm so pleased to be here to present the Australian government's perspective at this ORF Japan International Conference, so aptly titled Strategic High Tide in the Indo-Pacific. I'm looking forward to hearing the conference discussions today and tomorrow, and I see you are featuring an impressive lineup of speakers, including some Australian experts, Dr. David Brewster, Senior Research Fellow at the Australian National University's National Security College, and Dr. Anthony Bergen, a Senior Fellow at ASPI, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Let me take this opportunity also to acknowledge the ORF's depth of knowledge, research and analysis encompassing the spectrum of issues affecting the Indo-Pacific. Testament to this is my Foreign Minister, Marise Payne's frequent and enthusiastic engagement at ORF events, most recently last month's Sci-Fi, the India Conference on Technology, Innovation and Society. Minister Payne also delivered the third Indo-Pacific oration in person in New Delhi during her visit in September. And she reminds us often of her good friendship with ORF President Samia Saran. Both Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Minister Payne have addressed the past two Raisina dialogues, and in Minister Payne's case, also the 2019 edition, where she announced the arrival of Australia's new resident Consul General in Kolkata, establishing Australia's fourth diplomatic post in India. And occupying this role in Kolkata, my focus is to further develop Australia's links with eastern and northeastern India, a region which, inclusive of the Bay of Bengal, is crucial to India's Act East objectives, as well as vital to fostering a resilient and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Today, I will briefly outline how Australia sees and engages in the Indo-Pacific, this diverse and dynamic region of prominence at a time of shifting economic and strategic currents. For Australia, the Indo-Pacific encompasses our most important partners. Australia's vision for the Indo-Pacific is of an open, inclusive and resilient region, underpinned by respect for sovereignty. It's about ensuring countries' rights are respected regardless of their size and level of economic development, as well as cooperating on shared challenges and resolving differences based on rules and norms and international law. We recognise that challenges exist to this vision. The Indo-Pacific is increasingly at the centre of strategic competition. Evolving geopolitical dynamics are playing out in the region and manifesting in heightened contestation. Great power rivalry is intensifying. Territorial tensions are escalating on land and at sea. Military modernisation is accelerating, and we are experiencing unprecedented levels of technological disruption with cyber attacks and disinformation. Added to this, the immense health and economic toll of COVID-19 has amplified the challenges facing our region and complicated our efforts to promote a stable and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Prime Minister Morrison understood this well when he said at the launch of Australia's Defence Strategic Update that we need to prepare for a more disorderly post-COVID world. But the pandemic has also given us a fresh perspective and created new opportunities to build a durable strategic balance in the Indo-Pacific. Moving towards this new equilibrium requires like-minded countries to act in concert, more consistently, more cohesively, and more often on our shared interests. In this context, it's natural that countries such as Australia, India, and Japan, and the United States, of course, are working together to strengthen our partnerships across the Indo-Pacific. The Quad is a key pillar of Australia's regional engagement, bringing together our country's individual capabilities to promote a positive agenda for the Indo-Pacific. The Quad is not an alliance, but a diplomatic network that assists the four countries as fellow democracies to advance our shared vision for an open, inclusive and resilient Indo-Pacific underpinned by the global rules-based order. A grouping with a positive and practical agenda to support the sovereignty and independence of Indo-Pacific countries. The Quad's momentum has increased over the past 2 years as we confronted the global health issues of COVID-19. The landmark Quad Vaccine Partnership is expanding access to safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines in the Indo-Pacific and will provide at least 1.2 billion vaccine doses globally by the end of 2022. Australia and Japan have both committed to 60 million vaccine doses each. India has already delivered 7.5 million vaccines. The Quad is also continuing vaccine coordination with the WHO, Gavi, CEPI, UNICEF, and support for the COVAX facility, as well as strengthening science and technology cooperation. And there's more than vaccines to the Quad, of course. At the first in-person Quad Leaders Summit in Washington on the 24th of September, Quad partners announced deepened cooperation on other shared priorities, including cybersecurity, technology standards, promoting quality infrastructure, and combating climate change. These initiatives are helping to build regional countries' capacities in ways that support the longer-term stability and resilience of the Indo-Pacific. And the Quad complements Australia's engagement with other bodies such as ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and our other bilateral, plurilateral and multilateral cooperation. Just last month, Australia and ASEAN agreed to enhance their relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership, affirming Australia's ongoing commitment to ASEAN and its central role in the Indo-Pacific. Indeed, I think it is true to say that all Quad partners support the ASEAN-led regional architecture. I should also make mention of the new enhanced trilateral security partnership of Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States, AUKUS. AUKUS will also complement our collective efforts for a stable, secure and prosperous Indo-Pacific, free from coercion. AUKUS is an enhanced capability and technology sharing partnership focused on defence, cyber, artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, and of course undersea capabilities, that is to say, submarines. We look forward to advancing our growing practical trilateral cooperation also with India and Indonesia and with India and France in the coming months. I will finish by touching on some examples of growing cooperation between India, Australia and regional partners on oceans and environmental conservation, which are also of fundamental importance to the Indo-Pacific. Australia is proud to partner with India, as Anasua mentioned, in leading the marine ecology pillar of the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, the IPOI, which was announced by Prime Minister Modi at the 2019 East Asia Summit. On our side, we are contributing Australian knowledge and expertise developed through our own experience of managing marine plastics, a pressing challenge for many countries in the region. The Australia-India Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative partnership is also supporting a baseline study involving ORF Kolkata, the Australian National University and RSIS Singapore on regional collaborative arrangements on marine ecology, including IUU fishing and marine debris in Southeast Asia, in the Bay of Bengal and in the Pacific. The study is a first step. It will inform proposals for how Australia and India can work together to sponsor regional collaborative arrangements on marine ecology in the Indian Ocean region and Indo-Pacific. Given both Australia and India's dependence on the Indian Ocean for our people's livelihoods and economic well-being, we will continue to cooperate on a range of maritime issues through fora such as the IPOI and also the Indian Ocean Rim Association. And we were pleased to support French accession to IORA, which will only serve to strengthen it further. We also applaud India's stewardship of the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, which Australia supports. In Glasgow last week, Prime Ministers Modi and Morrison launched a new CDRI initiative, the Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, with Australia to contribute $10 million through the CDRI to help our Pacific Island neighbours adapt and become more resilient to climate change. This is just one of the many examples of Indo-Pacific partners, such as India and Australia working together to address climate change. I haven't even started on the major investments by both countries toward research and development of low emissions technologies so that we can reach net zero and transition to a cleaner energy future. Suffice to say, there is much work being done there. In concluding, I note that the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has just released our annual report, which gives a sense of the global context in which we're currently operating. I quote, "In our region and globally, states continued to grapple with how best to balance their economic, security and public safety interests in the COVID-19 environment. The government remained concerned about long-standing international threats to peace and security. We, that is my ministry, sought to improve compliance with norms and rules relating to the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and the peaceful use of space in a period of escalating great power strategic competition. And COVID-19 intensified other security threats. This has underscored the importance of robust international cooperation." And ladies and gentlemen, I think we have seen today some common themes emerge in all of the presentations given. In short, we're all in furious agreement on that cooperation. So I'll leave it at that for now. Best wishes for the conference, which I'm sure will stimulate some fascinating discussions on the future of the Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruan, for outlining the Australian government-ORF relation, and also drawing attention to the broad contours of Australia's critical role in the Indo-Pacific, as also bringing in the centrality of the Quad, in fact, in this particular geographical space. So now, in fact, we again move virtual to the online to have the special keynote address from Professor Horimoto Takenori. So it's over to you, Professor.
Hello, I am speaking from Tokyo. Can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Yes, you're audible.
You are audible.
But my image is not coming up to the screen because my PC is rejecting to put a mic on camera through this. So please listen my argument through voices only. Okay? Now, I'd like to thank all the persons concerned in organizing very interesting the seminar today and tomorrow, and particularly Dr. Anasua and Sohini both. And thank you very much for these two persons. Now, I'm going to say the 4 points. The first one is the primary objective of my talk, and then protagonist of the Indo-Pacific, and then way out from the present situations, and then conclusions. And this is what I'm going to say, because this is a very, this morning I prepared because I could not show all my PowerPoint. So please forgive me, there's some misspellings in this slide. Now, firstly, about the primary objectives. And to avoid discursive arguments, and the essential point would be evaluation of China's role in the Indo-Pacific IP region, how to cope with a move, which constitutes the base of the topics following 3 sessions. My main gist is as below. The US looks to give up its policy of engagement like in the past and posits it as a strategic competitor. Its policy needs to tend to be arbitrary. And China appears to confident of its national powers and might consider dictating its terms to other IP countries using measures to forestall moves negating its IP policy. And then necessity of short and medium policy orientation along with the engagement and balancing policy for the order of IP. Now, a little bit more detail. The first 3 protagonists, the United States. Pax Americana has been possible in the last century, and because it is limited in Asia Pacific, but situation has changed to Indo-Pacific, and moreover there's a relative decline of its powers and its failure of engagement policy with China. In the latest Foreign Affairs, Mr. Meyer has critically examined this aspect. US has stopped employing the engagement policy. And then NSS, National Security Strategy, 2017, the specified growing trade deficit with China and termed China as a strategic competitor. Now in March this year, the National Security Strategy said only strategic competitor mounting a sustained challenge to the stable and open international system. And thirdly, I'd like to point out the United States seems tend to be arbitrary. Withdrawal from the TPP and suspension of the engagement policy occurs also without notifying to the others. And China. The Xi Jinping the great liberation of Chinese nation and 2 centuries of 2021 and 2049. China is possible to tone down the others' demand and try to let others comply to its demand by using military, trade, and aid, and so on. Now, according to my observation, now China faces two difficulties. First is whether it can avoid theory of middle income trap. Middle income trap between the 10,000 and 12,000. China's per capita income is in 2019 is 10,216, and this is middle income. That means to say that income will not go up higher. And secondly, closely related to the middle income trap, China's working age population of 15 to 64-year-old is rapidly getting gray. Its median age is 38.4 years old. Whereas Japan's case, 48.6 years old. India is 28.7. Because of this, China has introduced three China child policy since May this year. So that what I mean to say is to be a superpower in the coming years are not guaranteed. And in this connection, the Brookings Institute reports China 2049, published in 2020, last year, predicts China economic growth rate slower to 2.7 to 4.2, overcoming middle income trap. And by 2049, moderately developed economy, but 8 to 10% permanently over. China's military activity in the past decade and its more recent warrior diplomacy suggests Beijing will unlikely to be a benign hegemon should it somehow reach power parity with Washington. The problem for China is China's policy is to use both stick without voting right and carrot economic growth. And the economic future is uncertain. So what I mean to say, and particularly I'd like to underline this point, is we should not underestimate or overestimate China's future. We should be more objective in seeing the future course of China. And then protagonists of Indo-Pacific countries. ASEAN countries reject to take side of the two countries, and they would not welcome U.S.-China tussle as an IP tussle, nor do not want to tussle to be trivialized as the Indo-Pacific tussle. For them, it is not a new Cold War. They want to be benefited economically by the relations with China, but maintain a so-called ASEAN centrality. And Japan might feel assured U.S. return to Indo-Pacific, but because of its geographical proximity with China, it needs engagement policy. It is a moot point to increase its defense burden. Perhaps maybe requested by China and by the United States. And India wants to stabilize and manage its relations with China. And another problem is big trade deficit with China. Perhaps India may go by a so-called Indian way. The book recently published by Indian Foreign Minister. And Australia is similarly issue with China. But Australia play a very meaningful role in the coming years to come. And then coming to the third topic, way out. The firstly, overall policy. In the Indo-Pacific region, all the actors are concerned about China with its aggressive military action and influential strategy. US is losing its hegemony in the region relatively, attempting to set its burdens, leaving them to be shouldered by a concerned countries themselves. Then how can we check the China's move? The one might consider policies in two scales of duration, short-term and medium-term, based on engagement and balancing. Engagement and balancing are set of policy. All through this process, perhaps Japan and India could be a cooperative also. Firstly, I'd like to say about short-term policy. Firstly, engagement. Besides bilateral relations, unilateral and multilateral mechanisms must be developed. Now there is RCEP and TPP. And India is indispensable for the two mechanisms. And then former National Security Advisor Menon termed India's withdrawal from the RCEP as a huge mistake. Will US is going to rejoin the TPP? It's a very mute point. The US tends to manipulate its own calculations without showing the alternatives, like Miyashima. Preferably, China should not be discouraged from membership if we can accommodate of its stipulations. But how go along with the Taiwan joining TPP? And then another aspect of short-term policy is balancing. The Quad or Quad Plus can be one possible mechanism, although it is not full-fledged. The China's criticism Asian NATO is inaccurate, since Quad lacks its teeth. It should be noted, since 2020, Quad has been moving gradually from talk shop to an entity of substantive formation, such as a joint exercise, and its first summit meeting in March this year, AUKUS also. And also there is the entries of the European countries and EU into Quad would be a positive significance in terms of China policy. Quad is, at the moment, not sufficiently matured. It can carry important implication of normative character, basic on concept of fillip or 4EIP. This I signify inclusive, suggested by India. And also there's an important aspect is that the democracy should be added as a normative significance in the policy of balancing. And then comes the medium policy. And in the medium policy, first is engagement. As far as engagement measures are concerned, mechanisms of the RCEP, TPP, others might be necessary and also meet requirements for medium-term policy. And balancing of the medium-term policy, as a balancing policy, Quad is far from sufficient because of its expansion of Chinese military. But military expansion tends to create escalation, as happened in the history, and then may create a kind of chicken race. So under these situations, I come to the number four, step by and then in this situation, it is necessary to make regional order and institution building in the Indo-Pacific in the future. The power configuration of the Indo-Pacific under transformation, and this would be a fundamental factor for regional order and future institution building. India's power position in the coming decade could be one of the crucial factors. And then other point is the two domains and entities, and political and strategic objective entity for security contrivance for maritime stability such as IPOI, and another aspect is economic objective entity for building connectivity among the sub-regions and economic integration through the production network and value chain such as BIMSTEC. So I'm coming to the last point, step-by-step approach and cooperation. And then it is easy to say about the regional order or regional mechanism. But to say something is quite easy, but to be put into actual practice is very difficult to happen. So naturally, it will be necessary through a step-by-step approach based upon consensus. And there could be a appropriate IP regional order and finally institutions. I didn't clearly mention in my paper, PowerPoint, that for the building of the EU, it takes about 200 years to come to the present stage. And same thing could be said about in the Pacific. It is not so easy to create order, and also, and further ahead, there should be an institution. And then this is a kind of step-by-step approach, and gradually it will be formed in the future. And there is some Japanese proverb, Manjushri's cooperation. That Manjushri is the associated with wisdom, prajna, in the Mahayana Buddhism. In Japanese proverb, it is said, 3 persons cooperation, through cooperations, they will coming up to the equal to the Manjushri's wisdom. So in this way, the countries concerned in the Indo-Pacific should be endeavor to try to create the firstly liberal regional order, and then in the future we'll see the possibility of the institution building in this region. And perhaps at the moment there is so-called East Asian community. There will be one of the options, but takes a lot of time to materialize this institution to coming up. So in this way, there are so many issues, so many problems, and then there's a change of transformation, and then configuration of powers in this region. So there are so many problems, issues has to be sorted out, but we should not give up in creating such kind of stations in the coming decades. And thank you very much for inviting me this very interesting and very the constructive approach to the issues related in Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Horimoto, for the keynote address. And as we approach the end of this session, I presume that we should have a bit of an interaction with a few questions that have come up from the audience. Well, there are 3 questions essentially, and let me just take this up with Mr. Sapkal first of all. This question is Mr. Sapkal. This is, what new dimensions of partnership has the pandemic brought to light for India in its aspirations from the Indo-Pacific? Should I repeat once more? What new dimensions of partnership has the pandemic brought to light for India in its aspirations from the Indo-Pacific? Mr. Sapkal, would you like to respond to that? Is Mr. Sapkal connected? I think he has gone offline, I presume. Okay, so there are two more questions, one for Mr. Nakamura, the other is for Ms. Answorth. So, Rohan, this is a question for you. As may be observed by the pillars of the IPOI, may it be said that non-traditional concerns are new avenues of confidence building amongst the like-minded countries of the Indo-Pacific. What are your thoughts on this? Should I repeat once more? As may be observed by the pillars of the IPOI, may it be said that non-traditional concerns are new avenues of confidence building amongst the like-minded countries of the Indo-Pacific.
I agree with that premise, although you could say, are they new concerns? I mean, when you drill down, you can look at, for example, the cooperation that we're undertaking on marine debris and plastics and say it's a new concern because plastics are a new substance, I suppose, to a certain extent. But the broader context is it's environmental concerns. They've always been environmental concerns. They're becoming more acute. But I think it is to be applauded that in these new organisations, we are looking more broadly at the big spectrum of issues that are facing us, and that, you know, we're finding avenues of cooperation in areas that we haven't broached before. But in the new context, they're necessary. So it's just to be applauded. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is for Seiji Nakamura. The question that has come from the audience is that, does Japan plan to invest in the Indian port section to expand maritime connectivity? Does Japan plan to invest in the Indian port section to expand maritime connectivity?
Answer is very simple. If we receive the request, we'll consider. Anything is possible. We are open. And I'm sure the private sector is developing in the port development in India, and you have a lot of players who already involved and invested hugely on the port development in order to, of course, accelerate the capacity for the trade. And why not?
Well, that's straight and simple. And I presume there was a question from the audience. Is there something in writing that has been posed by Professor Chatterjee? Yep. Can you just send that across to me? Or else you can just give me the piece of paper, if it is legible. Okay. Okay. Well, this is for Professor Horimoto. The elephant in the room, needless to mention, is China. China seems to be pursuing slow but determined policy of expansionism. How the different actors in the Indo-Pacific plans to engage with China to deal with this issue? Professor, if you're still online, can you just respond to this?
Yes.
How the different actors in the Indo-Pacific plan to engage with China to deal with this issue?
Yes, this is the crux of the matter. This is the crux of the matter. And then there are so many people are saying so many different things against or for in this aspect. And I should say, it is not easily to be solved. And moreover, it takes lots of factors take into considerations. And for example, India is trying to manage and the balancing with China's such a policy. But at the moment, China is facing, and particularly Xi Jinping is trying to be the 3 consecutive period as a chairman of the CCP. So under that situation, the China cannot backtrack from the current policy orientation now. So under this, and then he may be selected again for the second term, the going back to the traditional sort of successors theory. But Xi Jinping would like to show its strengths through such show of forces. Otherwise, his leadership in the party and in the country will not be maintained. So in this sense, the Chinese elephant in the room, you said, is very facing a kind of difficult situations. And one more point I should point out, how the China's economic prosperity or economic growth could be continued. And as I mentioned in my presentation, one is middle income trap. Others is the getting gray of the labor population. These are the very, the negative aspect for the China to think in terms of the future development, because the economic growth provide a sort of defense expenditure, but dwindling of its economic growth makes it impossible for China to increase its military budget. So in that way, China is also facing various aspects, various difficulties in the years to come. That's what I meant to say. So that's why I could not be so pessimistic nor positive in that sense. Thank you.
Professor. There is another question for the Japanese CG. All the different actors across the globe showing interest in the Indo-Pacific, across the globe are showing interest in the Indo-Pacific with their visions of the region. Will it add up to an architectural whole in the region, or will it work as cross purposes? I presume that this question can be answered by both the CGs, I presume. So maybe Mr. Nakamura can go first. Should I repeat? Yes. All the different actors across the globe are showing interest in the Indo-Pacific with their visions of the region. Will it add up to an architectural whole in the region? I mean, WHOLE, architectural whole, not HOLE whole. Architectural whole in the region, or will it work as cross purposes? So are they going to be lead to a holistic framework, or is it going to, the goals are going to come against each other?
The vision of FOIP, free and open in the Pacific, and India's Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative is to basically to tackle the various issues among the countries who share the value of rule of law, and the countries who put a great importance of democracy and freedom. So it is basically to solve the issue is the key. So the deliberation by the Joint Secretary and my colleague and myself, this vision is to solve the issues. So it's not anything. So whatever the name of the vision is fine, but we are facing issues. To tackle the issues, we have to cooperate each other. So that's what Japan is putting on the floor, and ask anyone to join to solve the issue.
Right. Anything to add, Rowan, on that, or anything divergent from that?
No divergence. I think we had 6 speakers today, and I think what we saw was a great divergence of, a great convergence of views with themes coming up again and again and again, a shared vision for the Indo-Pacific. And I know that it's true that everybody has their own version. Even geographically, we have different versions of what the Indo-Pacific might be. But at the basis, there is enormous agreement about what is happening, how we need to cooperate more, and it is actually occurring. That agreement is being undertaken by countries everywhere all the time, and we're just seeing that grow enormously. So, as my colleague said, there is going to be a WHOLE hole, but in that regard, I did have a question for Professor Horimoto myself, because he talked about an Indo-Pacific order and how that would take decades to evolve. But my question to you, Professor, is what did you have in mind when you talked about an Indo-Pacific order? Something of very formal, of the type of a EU agreement, or something much less formal, or how do you see that evolving? Thank you.
Thank you. I presume that with that we come to the end of this inaugural session, and let me thank all those speakers, all the delegates, for an excellent deliberation. May I now request my colleague Shohini Bose to deliver the formal vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed listening to this very interesting inaugural session. We could not have hoped for a more vibrant start to our virtual international conference. For that, on behalf of ORF Kolkata and our collaborator for this event, the Government of Japan, I would like to thank every member of this August gathering, Mr. Vishvas V. Sapkal, Joint Secretary, Indo-Pacific and South, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, for delivering the inaugural address, Mr. Nakamura Yutaka, Consul General, Consulate General of Japan in Kolkata, and Ms. Rowan Ainsworth, Consul General, Consulate General of Australia in Kolkata, for delivering the special addresses. Professor Horimoto Takenori for his very enlightening keynote address, and our very own faculty, Dr. Nilanjan Ghosh, Director ORF Kolkata, for chairing the session, and Dr. Anasua Chaudhury, Senior Fellow ORF Kolkata and convener of this event, for introducing the theme of this conference. On that note, we call a close to our inaugural session and look forward to the business sessions, which promise to be just as engaging as this. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you soon in our next session.